was in the yard this morning, finally trying to get things accomplished. I told myself this is my year to finally have the yard of my dreams, a backyard oasis. Of course, I've told myself that every spring for the last 5 years that I've owned this house. It's not that I'm too lazy to figure out the landscaping myself, it's just such a long process thanks to the previous owner's landscaping preferences. It seems rocks and stones were highly favored. Anyways, I was out this morning trying to beat the rain that was sure to roll in. I felt the stickiness in the air, the humidity was becoming almost suffocating, and my legs were greasy from using too much bug spray. I'm a mosquito magnet. All I want to do is plant some damn grass in this area along the fence. The task entails pulling all kinds of weeds and shoveling heaps of rocks into buckets. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I tell you there are rocks on top of rocks. When you think you've gotten all the dirt, you go ahead and rake it a nice flat surface, only to have the rake get stuck on more rocks. And sometimes there's a rock seemingly buried that's as big as my head. So imagine my surprise when I think I've just hit another big rock and I dig around and pull it out and it's actually a smooth, flat surface. Being intrigued, I dig a little more to find that it's actually a black metal box. I pulled out the box and let it sit on the ground and paused for a moment. I debate on whether or not I should open it. Of course I had to open it. After all, I'm a curious person. But what if it was a severed head or a human skull or something? What if I just dug up the previous owner's deceased pet? I wasn't prepared to see something like that, and I'd probably lose my mind. After I thought of all the possible scenarios, I decided it was likely a deceased pet. And if that was the case, I would dig a deeper hole and put it back in its resting place and try not to cry for the lost pet that wasn't even mine to begin with. I crouched down with my greasy, sprayed calves sliding across the back of my thighs because full-on sitting was committing myself to spending too much time with this box. I opened its weak latch and took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Much to my initial delight, there were toys and papers and clear plastic bags inside. I adjusted myself to sit cross-legged in the grass and began to go through everything. I first pulled out a few weebles, which I instantly recognized because I played with them myself as a kid. My grandparents had always kept the toys their kids played with growing up, so the grandchildren played with them and now might be considered vintage toys. There were also pictures drawn from what I assume was a spirograph, as well as a Viewmaster with no slides. Next, I pulled out the playbill for St. Joseph High School production of Fiddler on the Roof from 1978. I browsed through the program and the names of the cast and crew. I didn't have any relatives that went to St. Joseph in the 70s, so I'm not even sure what I was looking for there. As I closed the program, I felt a drop of rain hit my arm and quickly threw everything back into the box and ran into the house. There were still a few more items at the bottom that I had to go through. When I got into the house, I wiped off the dirt on the outside of the box, and I set it on the dining room table. I sat down and opened the box again, this time with no hesitation. I took out the items I had already seen and carefully laid them out on the table next to the box. All that was remaining was a journal and 3 letters. The letters were all dated for June 29th, 1978. When I opened the first letter, I saw the date. I felt a chill that I've opened this almost exactly to the date 40 years later. The first 2 letters were from girls named Jennifer and Amy. They told about their idea to bury the time capsule, the boys they liked, and that they were all seniors at St. Joseph's. Jennifer, Amy, and Heather, who the third letter was from, were all best friends and they were going to have the best summer yet. It was all very cute, until I got to reading Heather's letter. Here's what her letter said. June 29th, 1978. Hello. I don't really know how to start a letter in a time capsule. I guess I could have written, Dear Future Heather, or something. But I don't even know if I will get around to digging this up in 30 years. My mom or dad might find it buried in a yard, call it junk, and yell at me for digging a hole. We're going to bury this tomorrow when they're at work. Jennifer's mom stays home, and Amy's got a bunch of brothers and sisters that would tell on us, so we picked my house. We're going to dig a hole under all that gravel and stones, and hopefully it'll be less noticeable. I just hope Miss Thompson isn't watching us. Honestly, this time capsule was my idea. I don't even know if I'll make it 30 years to see this letter again. I wanted to dig it up after 5 years, but Amy said that wasn't long enough. Amy and Jennifer just don't understand, though. I've tried to explain it to them, but if my parents, my boyfriend, and my best friends don't even believe in me, then I hope whoever finds this does. We've lived in this house my whole life. Our neighbors are really nice. Miss Thompson next door, though, she's been really different lately. She's been freaking me out. Miss Thompson had a daughter and a son, and her son is a lot older. My mom said he was born out of wedlock, and he isn't around too much because he's an adult now. He comes home on the holidays, and I don't think he lives in town. Anyways, Miss Thompson's daughter is a year younger than me, and I played with her when I was little. Her name was Anna. When I was 12 years old, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson took Anna on a trip. I didn't understand a lot of what happened after that, but everything changed. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson came home without Anna. Mrs. Thompson stayed in the house a lot. Then we went to a funeral for Anna. It wasn't until years later that I actually asked my mom and dad what happened. It was all very secretive. No one ever wanted to say what happened. All they told me was that there was an accident when they were camping. Finally, Mrs. Thompson would come out of the house. When I was 14, she started being very social with me. She would buy me gifts for my birthday and Christmas, and she would say things like, if Anna were still here, I know she would love this, every time she gave me something. I was always polite, even though it made me a little uncomfortable to be compared to Anna. She would also sew me blouses and dresses in all of Anna's favorite colors. A few months ago, Mr. Thompson left. I overheard my parents talking one night, and it sounded like Mr. Thompson left because he found another woman, and they were getting a divorce. I knew my parents didn't like to talk about these things with me, so I never asked directly about it. We were a very strict Catholic family, so divorce was not something we often discussed because marriage is forever. However, my mom would always invite Mrs. Thompson over for coffee before I got home from school. Every time I'd walk into the house, Mrs. Thompson would look at me with tears in her eyes and say, I wish Anna could see you now. She'd be so proud of the young woman you've become. My mom would smile politely. I think she thought it was kind of weird too, but anytime I told her I didn't like it, she would say, we have to help Mrs. Thompson through this difficult time in her life. We have to be good neighbors. Sure, all this was a little weird, but things started to get worse. I liked to read on her front porch in the evenings, and I stopped that because Mrs. Thompson would always sneak up on me when I was in the middle of a good book. I wouldn't notice she was there until I felt her breath on my neck. Sometimes when I turned to her, she would simply ask about what I was reading. Other times she would say nothing and walk back to her porch. She would continue to stare at me while I was reading. So to not make things obvious, I'd pretend to finish a chapter, and then look to her and say goodnight and go to bed. My bedroom window and Anna's bedroom window faced each other. We would often stay up at night, calling at each other's windows by shining flashlights. The code was to flick it on and off 3 times, and that meant our parents were sleeping, and we could open our windows and have a little chat. Last month I was reading in bed. I like to read under the covers with a flashlight. I swore I saw a light flash into my room 3 times. I turned my flashlight off and I held my breath while I waited. It happened again. I was too afraid to go to my window and look. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or not, but I didn't want to find out. After a week of the flashlight beams coming in every night, I finally got the courage to go to my window and look. Sure enough, 3 flashes came in. I took a deep breath and I walked to the window. I squinted to see it was Mrs. Thompson. How did she know our code? Maybe Anna told her, but this was supposed to be between just us. I stared at her for what felt like forever. I didn't know what to do. She stood motionless, and then I decided to wave. As soon as I waved, she just walked away. I was terrified. I told my parents about it, and they told me I was probably just dreaming, but I hadn't even gone to sleep yet, and I didn't want to argue with them. This ritual happened every night, until one night she finally waved back. Then it didn't happen again for a few days. My parents went out of town for one night, and they let me stay home by myself. I decided to have Michael over. I know my parents would be upset about it, but he wouldn't spend the night. We were just in my room with the lights turned off, and the 3 flashes came through. Michael asked what it was, and I told him that since he didn't believe me before, he should go to the window and have a look and see for himself. We both went to the window, and Mrs. Thompson was standing there with an angry look. She opened her window, so Michael opened mine, and she said Heather's parents would not approve. I certainly don't approve, and slammed her window shut before we could respond. Michael refused to leave me home alone for the rest of the night. He was such a sweet guy. The next day, Mrs. Thompson invited me over for lunch. I hesitantly went over and thought maybe I could beg her not to tell my parents about Michael coming over. We started eating and everything was just small talk, and then she started sobbing. I moved next to her and put one arm around her and held her hand with the other. She then squeezed my hand so hard it was painful and said, "I don't think you should parade around like such a little slut. Bad things happen to girls that act like that." I was shocked and I didn't know what to say. And then she slapped me across the face and stood up and yelled, "Anna, I did not raise you to be a slut." I stood up and I tried not to cry and I backed away from her, but she kept coming after me. She pushed me against the wall and yelled at me to go to my room. She kept calling me Anna. I tried again to move to the door, but she was very strong. She had pinned me against the wall and she had spit on me and said, "You will do what you're told. You know what happens if you don't, and your father isn't here to protect you." I finally pushed her away and ran out the door. My parents were to be home soon, and I locked all of our doors and waited for them. I decided not to tell them what happened. They'll never believe me anyways. Then I started receiving notes from her. The first one was in my book. I left it on the porch, and stuck between the pages was a short letter where she had told me that she was always watching me. Another said that I would get what I deserved. Finally, one said that I would be locked in my room forever the next chance she gets. Everyone keeps telling me she's just a batty old woman, not to worry. Michael says he's saving up to buy an engagement ring and we can get married quick and live together, and he will protect me the rest of my life. I just have an eerie feeling that I won't make it that long if Mrs. Thompson has anything to do with it. I'm going to go back out in a few days and dig up the box and add my journal to it. I don't want the other girls to get any ideas and try to dig it up and read it someday when I'm not around. Sincerely, Heather Jones. To be honest, I'm a little creeped out and I wish I'd never found this thing. However, I'm going to read through Heather's journal tonight and I'll report back tomorrow.